So yesterday we showed you Joe Biden's interview with the BBC. It was lamentable. It was sad. It was pathetic. It was Biden-esque. And today he appeared on The View. Now, we were told that he was going to be joined by his wife, the doctor, Dr. Jill. She did not show up. He was solo there with all the ladies. And boy, they were going to be tough on him with all the real hard questioning. So I don't know how he did. Let's take a look. By the look of it here with this still, doesn't look like he was facing a lot of grilling. Because after all, he had such a brilliant, perfect presidency. What's there to ask him about? What's there to challenge him on?
My question is, how are you?
Right? The tough questions, like right out of the chute. She's had days and days to work on this and craft the right question. And I get my opportunity. Here's my first question. How you doing? Hey, how you doing? This is pathetic. I want to remind you, this is an ABC News show. ABC News. David Muir, you proud of your colleagues here? You proud of this work product from your division, ABC News? Yeah. They are having a blast, aren't they? By the way, Joy Behar, God bless her, same age as Joe Biden. I think within a year. One of them seems to have brain damage. I'll let you decide which one. Actually, I was wrong. I guess for one segment, Jill was there. Here's a quick look at how she did with the old guy.
Since you left office, there have been a number of books that have come out deeply sourced from Democratic sources that claim in your final year there was a dramatic decline in your cognitive abilities. Are these sources wrong?
They are wrong. Think of what we're left with. We're left with a circumstance where we had an insurrection, not since the Civil War, the pandemic, because of the incompetence of the last outfit, end up over 1 million people dying. We found ourselves unable to deal with a lot of just basic issues.
Yeah, he seems totally in charge of his faculties. No mental decline there at all. Thanks for answering the question directly. Of course, if there was a journalist among the news panel there, news program at ABC News, they would have stopped him after each one of those things and saying, hang on a second, insurrection? Insurrection is actually a federal crime. Why did nobody from your Justice Department charge one person with the crime of insurrection? Neither Donald Trump nor any of his advisors nor any of the 1,000 people you had arrested, not one of them was charged with insurrection. So why are you sitting here calling it an insurrection if you didn't actually charge anyone with insurrection? That's a lie, isn't it, sir? Also, did you just say 1 million people died because of the incompetence of the Trump administration? Rather than go into detail about why you think that, let me ask you a basic question. Do you believe the COVID-19 virus originated from the laboratory in Wuhan? Yes or no? Yes or no, Mr. Biden? Where do you think that virus came from? Love to get an answer to that question too, but no, we didn't get it. Anyway, Joe flying solo there with the ladies on The View. Let's look at some of the more questions and answers.
You had made the selfless, very difficult decision to step aside.
I reject the premise, if I could. Why is it automatically assumed that this was a selfless decision? That's buying propaganda. First of all, by every legitimate report about what transpired between his disastrous performance in that debate and the day he announced he was leaving the presidency or the candidacy, which was, I believe, 4 weeks later, by every account, he was pressured into doing it by Nancy Pelosi, by Chuck Schumer, by Barack Obama. There was nothing selfless about this. If he was selfless, he wouldn't have announced his reelection campaign in the first place. He would have stayed true to his original word that he was just going to be a transition president for one term. But then he decided he was going to run. How is this selfless? What evidence do you have, Sarah Haynes, that this was selfless? He was forced into it, number one. Number two, if he thought about himself at all in this equation, he was trying to relieve himself of the humiliation of being defeated by Donald Trump in the landslide that Trump was going to have. You know that the day that he announced he was leaving the candidacy, Virginia showed Trump in the lead. Virginia. Forget about all the swing states we know about. If he had stayed, there would have been a lot more. New Jersey was neck and neck when Biden decided to get out. It wasn't selfless. It was selfish. It was self-preservation. He was trying to salvage whatever was left of his dignity, of his reputation, and there ain't anything left. But if anybody suggests that it was a selfless decision, they're buying and regurgitating propaganda because, it's The View. a news program.
Why do you think the vice president lost?
I wasn't surprised, not because I didn't think the vice president was qualified. She is. They went the route, the sexist route. A woman, she's this, she's that. Really, I've never seen quite as successful and a consistent campaign undercutting the notion that a woman couldn't lead the country, a woman of mixed race.
Just so I can understand this, he thought she was more than qualified. He thought she was a great candidate, yet he wasn't surprised that she lost because America is racist and sexist. Now, listen, he knows what program he's on, so I guess he knew that that would go over well with The View. But think about what a despicable human being this is. A man who is enjoying the benefits of, I believe, a $400,000 a year pension, full-time social Secret Service security at all times, all of the trappings of the presidency, the ability to say that he was a former president, the ability to live in the White House as the president of the United States for 4 years. And yet, what kind of horrific opinion he has about our country. By the way, he was vice president for 8 years with a black president, and yet he still thinks you're racist. I'm not surprised. There's no way she was going to win. After all, our country is sexist and racist. Well, if that's the case, why didn't you stay in, dude? And why did you endorse her immediately? I mean, if you really wanted to beat Trump, if you really wanted your values and your principles to continue, and now he says he wasn't surprised. What kind of insult is that to her, by the way? I'm sure they have a great relationship, though, right? I'm sure they talk all the time. Well, let's see.
Yeah. Well, when was the last time you spoke with the vice president, and has she talked to you about what she wants to do next? Sought any advice? Maybe governor?
Yesterday, I talk to her frequently. We stay in touch, number one. Number two, she's sought my opinion. I'm not going to tell you what it is. She's got a difficult decision to make about what she's going to do. I hope she stays fully engaged. But we have a lot of really good candidates as well.
Can I just add, and again, I hate to throw logic into the mix here when a politician is sitting there mumbling through a pile of bullshit like you're having to decipher here, but you just said that she is the most qualified woman that you've ever seen, one of the greatest candidates prepared to be president. You picked her to be one heartbeat away from your presidency, and you endorsed her to be president. So why would you not endorse her right now? Why wouldn't you sit there and say, I hope she runs again? I was right about her when I picked her to be my vice president. I knew she was prepared and ready to go, and she'd be great. I was right about her when I endorsed her the day I pulled out and I campaigned for her and I wanted her to be president, and she's still our best. What? We've got a lot of other great candidates. Well, then why didn't you endorse them? We got a lot of great candidates. Well, why didn't you pick them to be your vice president? This makes no logical sense. If he is truly honest about his opinion of Kamala Harris, then there would be no reason why he wouldn't endorse her 100% right now. Has there been some other candidate who suddenly is more qualified? A woman who was vice president for 4 years? I mean, again, here's the truth of the matter is she's a freaking disaster. And everybody knows it. Even he knows it. But he can't say it. And no one on that panel can say, sir, that makes no sense. You picked her to be your vice president. Why wouldn't you endorse her right now? So, again, Joe Biden, if he's talking, he's lying. And the lies continued.
Do you think you would have beat him?
Yeah, he still got 7 million fewer votes. A lot of people didn't show up. They were very close in those toss-up states. It wasn't a slam dunk. He's had the worst 100 days any president's ever had.
Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah.
Joy Behar screams in, that's a fact. Well, I'm sorry, what evidence do you have to support that? People are talking about polls, but we already know how they game the polls about Donald Trump on and on and on. But again, not to screw anybody else up with how they're digesting this information, but let's just inject some logic here. Kamala Harris lost the election. He was just asked, do you think if you had run, you would have beaten him? He says, yes, I would have beaten him. All right. So right there, Kamala Harris lost. He won. Kamala Harris lost. He thinks he would have won. But then asked if he made the right decision by not running, he says yes. And then asked if he's had any mental or physical or cognitive decline, he says no. So how exactly is it the right decision to not run again if you would have won and you're claiming that you haven't missed a step. So if you're all there and there's nothing wrong with you cognitively, and you claim you would have beaten Trump, and we know Kamala didn't beat Trump, please explain how it was the right decision to step down. Also, by the way, explain how you would have beaten Trump when you were already underwater in those very same polls that are stacked against Trump every single time when you decided to pull out. I wish there was a journalist on this panel to ask such questions. Instead, they ask questions like this.
There were still 6 full months. Every decision I made, every decision we made, I hope I didn't sound the wrong way. I don't think anybody thought we'd be successful as we were. We passed the Recovery Act, CHIPS and Science Act. We got more major legislation passed to fundamentally change the direction of the country. I was sick and tired of trickle-down economics. The strongest economy in the world when we left. That's not hyperbole. That's a fact.
It's not a fact. And if it was that strong, why did Kamala Harris lose? Why did the American people vote for Donald Trump mostly based on the economy and immigration and border security? By the way, not many questions about those important issues either. Are you following any of this? The big takeaway here is that Joe Biden was just too good a president. That's the reason Kamala Harris lost. That's the reason he pulled out of the race, because he was just so successful. And no one challenges that, saying, I'm sorry, sir, that doesn't make any sense. If you were that successful, then I don't know, you would have won, right?
When the vice president was here, I asked her if she would have done something differently than your administration because of all the successes your administration had. Her response was, there is not a thing that comes to mind. That answer was weaponized against her. First, is that true?
First of all, I did not advise her to say that. I think she was talking about wouldn't have changed the successes. She has to be her own person, and she was.
This is an amazing thing to watch. If Joe Biden is doing these interviews to try to salvage his legacy or his reputation in some way, what a complete and total disaster, which I kind of fits for his entire political career, actually. And it's delightful to watch because he's a hateful, horrible human being. But none of this passes anybody's smell test. You know, so let me get this straight. When Kamala Harris was asked, would you do anything different than Joe Biden when you're president? And her answer was, nothing comes to mind. What she meant was, everything's so great. Why would I change anything? And yet she campaigned on the fact that prices were too high, that inflation was awful, that much of our government wasn't working. None of this passes anybody's smell test. But again, I just want to keep going back to the journalism here. Nobody's challenging this narrative. No one is pointing out the fact to this feeble-minded, clearly debilitated individual that nothing he's saying is making any sense, and he can try to convince himself, but he's not convincing anyone else. It goes on and gets worse. But I gotta say, though, he looks good, doesn't he? I mean, he looks fit and trim and with it. I mean, look at the glow in his eyes. Look at what a guy.
So, Mr. President, Trump's 100th day in office.
By the way, as a Catholic who is sitting here eagerly awaiting to find out who our new pontiff is, may I just say, whenever a Catholic uses a Catholic gesture and a prayer as a punchline and a joke in a secular sense for politics, boy, it warms my heart. You two are just model Catholics. That's fantastic. Absolutely. Cross yourselves in the name of the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit for a political weapon to get a laugh. I can't wait to see who the Pope is. Can't wait.
Why is he going after people's health care and Social Security? Why is he doing that? What possible reason is that? Anyway, I can be short.
You're criticizing Trump. You can go on.
Yeah, you're criticizing Trump on a lie. How many times does he have to say that he's not going after Social Security or Medicare? And by the way, there's clip after clip after clip of Joe Biden as a senator talking about making the very same reforms that Donald Trump is talking about doing right now and accusing his political opponents, saying that he's going after to try to gut Social Security and Medicare when all he's trying to do is reforms. Of course, the difference is Trump's really going to do it. He's already proven it. Biden was just, full of. Anyway, Joy Behar jumped in a little bit more.
Why is he so fixated on you and blaming you for everything?
I beat him. I'm
Ticked
used to
off.
dealing with bullies.
Yeah, he knows a lot about bullies because he is one. Just ask Robert Bork and Clarence Thomas. Yeah, setting aside whether he beat him or not because of the extraordinary nature of the 2020 pandemic election, everything about that was framed in a lie. This is Joy Behar and the cast of The View claiming that Trump is obsessed with Biden because he brings him up. First of all, when you're a new president and it's the first 100 days, you spend a lot of time talking about how things were just done and how miserable things were and how you're fixing them. That's pretty normal. But if we want to talk about who's obsessed with who, I think it's fair to say that maybe Joy and Whoopi and Sonny and Alyssa and Anna and the whole team there at The View might be obsessed with Trump, given what their daily rundown is.
Do you take any responsibility for not hearing the concerns of voters on the border security or cost of living sooner? And do you take any responsibility for Trump's reelection?
Yes, I do, because look, I was in charge and he won. I take responsibility. We came up with a significant means by which we could deal with the border. What did Trump do? He got on the telephone and he called Republicans. Do not support it. It'll make Biden look good. Don't do it.
Actually, that's not what Trump said. Here's what Trump actually said. First of all, he didn't have any control over whether senators or congressmen were going to vote for this stupid, unnecessary so-called border security bill. What he said was, if you vote for this and I become president, you're actually going to make it harder for me to secure the border. We have the laws on the books right now. We just have a feckless, obscene president who refuses to enforce our current laws and wants this invasion to continue. Upwards to 20 million illegal immigrants from countries like Venezuela and El Salvador who are sending gang members here. That's what this guy wrought, right? And Trump would say, we don't need this. And in fact, there are provisions in here that would keep me from literally securing the border and doing a good job of locking down the border. Biden is still trying to play this game about, oh, we needed that bill and Trump blocked the bill and it was his fault. First of all, you tried that crap during the election and the American people saw through it and voted for Trump. So I don't know why you continue to try to repeat this lie. And by the way, we've all been alive for the last 100 days. You might not have been, sir. God knows you may have been in some sort of suspended vegetative state and they jump-started you and got you up for this interview. But I don't know if you've seen, we didn't need that bill. We didn't pass that bill into law. And look what happened. We had a president enforcing existing laws, and the border has literally never been as secure as it is right now. And yet he continues with this lie. Again, the ladies of The View allow the lie to be repeated and fester. But the best part is coming up with Joy Behar. The best part is Joy Behar's response to that lie.
Can't someone be impeached for something like that?
Yeah, she wants Trump impeached for something he did when he wasn't president, which, by the way, he didn't actually do. But that's the brilliance of Joy Behar in ABC News's news program, The View. One last clip from today's show.
I promised I would ask you this question. Not
Yes.
only they want me to ask it. You used an auto pen.
I just want to point out something here journalistically about what's going on. Do you notice that this one's being read? Did you hear the preface? They wanted me to ask. Who's they? They wanted me to ask you this. Let's listen to it together.
They want me to ask it.
They want me to ask it. Who's they? Who's they? So some grown-up at ABC News recognizes the fact that Joe Biden has finally given a post-presidency interview to an American broadcast company, the American broadcast company by coincidence. And it didn't go to George Stephanopoulos. It didn't go to David Muir. It didn't go to anybody. It went to The View. So somebody at ABC News said, guys, could we at least get one relevant question here? Could we actually ask him one tough question? And so she's apologizing for having to ask it. It's written down for her so she doesn't screw it up. Has to do with Biden using an auto pen. This is the best they could come up with. We should really ask him at least one question. All right, give it to Joy. Have her apologize about asking it. Have it really be about Trump, right? She frames the entire thing as Trump's obsessed with you using the auto pen. All right, so let's find out what Biden has to say about the auto pen.
That you used an auto pen to sign the pardons you issued right before you left office with members of your immediate family. Now he's calling for investigations and claiming the pardons are void and vacant.
Oh, he's vacant.
That's it? Could you answer the question? Apparently not. Well, ABC News, you got what you paid for there with The View. By the way, I reject the framing of the question because Joe Biden did not use the auto pen. If Joe Biden used the auto pen, he could have just used a pen. No. The auto pen was used instead of Joe Biden. The auto pen was used instead of Joe Biden. If Joe Biden had used the auto, if Joe Biden was sitting there and he pushed the button on the auto pen to sign something, why didn't Joe Biden just use his own fingers that push the button to actually sign the thing? He wasn't there. He was MIA. God knows where he was. Yeah, sign all that stuff. Absolutely. Use the auto pen. I don't care. So that's the question. And that's the answer. And Whoopi goes to commercial because it's a mic drop moment. By the way, one other quickie here. I showed you the clip of Jill sitting at the table, and he was asked about his cognitive abilities and whether he cognitively declined or not. And he was giving that rambling answer that I interrupted here. Let's just watch how the rambling answer finishes because something delightful happens. As Joe Biden is asked about his cognitive decline, here's what happened.
You know, one of the things that
and Alyssa, you know, one of the things I think is that the people who wrote those books were not in the White House with us.
What happened was Joe Biden was asked about all the books talking about his cognitive decline. He went on a rambling, incoherent answer, lost his train of thought, and then his wife had to finish the answer for him because he's perfectly of sound mind and completely capable of finishing this interview, let alone being president for 4 more years. Thank God the American people voted the way they did last year.